Okay, so did you catch Franzese ever at all? Like, was Franzese obviously Sonny was, but Michael was he known for in your era or your period?
I met him. In the '80s. My friend was a head mechanic, former Honda mechanic. He went out to Long Island, took me, and later on he told me that was him. He had I think, a mustache at the time. He looked he had a Hugapoo shirt on. It was probably, I don't even remember, late '70s, early '80s. He wasn't in jail, and he was very nice. He was trying to sell me a car, so he was
Yeah.
very nice. You would never think he was a gangster if you looked at him. Never. With Sammy, you could see it, but uh, met him once. I never really kept track of him. No, I had no idea about the gas scams or anything until I saw him on here. Honestly, I never heard of him in the street.
So and again, we don't count people's money, but Francis has historically done pretty well. I think
Yeah,
Sammy's kind of doing pretty well there. At the very least, I would assume he would. His podcast is doing well currently. I know
yeah.
he lost some good earning years being away. Why do you think they did it?
I think Sammy did it for money, and I
Yeah.
think Michael does it to prove he's out of the life. I think he likes to push his religion. I think a form of showing his religion is showing guys that like the gangsters that, hey, I'm good now. I really think that's it. I think Sammy needs the money. Even if Sammy's making 250, 300 a year from this, right? Which
Yeah.
probably, it's not a lot. It's a lot of money,
Yeah.
but you're bringing home 180 after taxes. Who knows
Yeah.
what he's doing? Maybe he's paying his son, his wife. Who knows what he's doing?
Yeah.
Michael, I think, does it for different reasons than Sonny, because I don't think Michael needs the money.
What about and Nelson? What about hey Jojo? What about the okay, because I was kind of thinking about this earlier. I'm like, you know what? Like, okay, so they did this probably for the money. Let's call it what it
Yeah.
is,
Oh,
right? And
yeah.
Michael, maybe not a lot of time put in, but he gets good money. Maybe helps with the slices. It helps with some of his business endeavor. So that perspective, they're coming on a little bit. Hopefully, JSV like, aren't we filming Monday and Wednesday? Well, that's the Four Horsemen. This is Armchair. Hopefully, he'll come on and bathe. I know has a commitment. But he's gonna try to jump on. It's not gonna be super long tonight. But so Vinny, sometimes when you argue, sometimes there's some truth. You argue
Hmm.
with a loved one or even an enemy, and then you argue and then you kind of make up. But sometimes when you argue in that heat of the moment, what you really feel sometimes comes out and the truth comes out. So Michael's knock on Sammy is that he's kind of living off the Gotti's name and using Gotti's name. What do you think about that?
Uh, Everyone in the street knew who Sammy was before Gotti.
Yeah.
I mean, in the street, not peripheral guys, maybe like me and stuff, but guys that were in the life knew who Sammy was. They knew. Sammy was with Shorty Spiro for a few years. Then he's with Gambino. He's right with Carlo. How could you not know who Sammy was? Michael, I think a lot of people heard of him,
Yeah.
but I don't think they knew really much of him other than he was Sonny
Well,
Franchise's.
that's what Sammy pinged back
I think
was.
Sammy's problem is that he feels, how did you know that Norby Walters was not going to do time? You're not the judge. So you
Yeah.
lucked out because Norby Walters didn't spend the jail sentence. So you lucked out there. But you had no guarantee when you opened up that Norby Walters was not going to jail. So you lucked out into not putting anybody away. There was no guarantee. It's Monday morning quarterback now that you say no one went away. Judge didn't tell you when you opened up that, don't worry, nobody's not getting any time. And I
Yeah.
think that's what Sammy has a problem with. That he didn't know he wasn't doing any time. He lucked into not doing any time. So Michael pretty much 50-50 could have put him away, and we wouldn't be talking about this tonight. So that's what I think it is. Sammy says, you didn't know that Norby wasn't doing any time. So how could you say you knew you weren't putting anybody away? And Michael keeps on saying, I knew no one was doing time. You weren't the judge. Maybe he had a judge that had a fight with his girlfriend the night before and says, you're doing a year, Norby. How do you know? You're not the judge. And I'm sure they didn't share that information that, Michael, don't worry, Norby's not going away in your testimony. No one could know that for sure before sentencing. But that's Sammy's problem, that he keeps on saying, I didn't put anybody away, and he lucked into not putting anybody away. You agree?
I, that I do agree because a
Yeah.
federal judge specifically, even with recommendations, you could have a deal, it could be in place, but when you get in front of your deal, respectfully, yours was state, but
State, yeah.
federal, you could have that same deal, and you go in front of a judge, it can't be thrown out the window. Michael testified on Frankie Campione, Vinny. Frankie Camp was a maid, Colombo. Yeah, so that's the thing. I'm guessing if there was more out there,
Why didn't Sammy come up with that then?
he would come on. And then also there was a debate on how much time. I know you didn't fully get to watch all of it because I kind of threw this on
I
you,
didn't. No.
but Francese's big thing is I served, of 10 years, I served, 8.5, 3 years in solitary confinement. But according to Sammy, he goes, you only served 4 years and 8 months or something like that. It just seems a big discrepancy between the two, which I think is a factual thing.
Right, it's not public record.
Yeah. So, and Sammy doesn't strike me as like a fact guy, meaning like somebody on his team probably researched to get a little dirt to win the
Yeah.
argument.
Right.
But I don't
right.
think Sammy even needs that,
Yeah, I agree. I agree. But I would think that's public record if you find out how long Mike Franzese was in jail. I don't know how there could be a question there.
Yeah.
Because I think who was the interviewer again? I forget his name. Vladdy or
Patrick
whatever?
Bet David.
David. David could say no, Sammy. He did 10 years. Why wouldn't the moderator step in and say no, Sammy, you're wrong. It's 10 years.
Okay, Gianni brings a good point up, right? So you when you think of Sammy, right,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at there's gangsters and there's racketeers, right? Where Sammy was a gangster, I don't think anybody debates that. Well, you
Absolutely.
could argue as a decent racketeer, he was worth like $20 million before he went away. He had multiple businesses. I think he was doing like $5 million a year on the books, something like that, right? But then he rolled. I think he was able to keep his money, but then he went into the drug business, whether he financed it or whatever, but he took a pinch for that. And as I understand, a lot of his wealth diminished, whether it be 20 years of lawyers or maybe didn't have as much or whatever. So Gianni's comment is government let him keep millions. He sells drugs, loses it. Sammy's got a poor business strategy. So you and I talk about this at nauseum. When you have a business plan and you have any business, not that you think first about exit strategy, but you first have to think, am I selling out later? Am I looking to build this up and give it to my kids? Like, what's my exit strategy at some point? Sometimes, again, you almost lead with it. Was Sammy almost a bad business guy in retrospect because he's kind of 76 years old and maybe has to go on YouTube if that's the case financially?
Well, his exit strategy wasn't becoming an informant and going to jail.
Yeah.
He thought he'd probably be out there forever, Sammy. But I think that, look, a lot of building, Sammy had a piece of everything.